and welcome to the Crux, where we try and get you to the crux of every ongoing issue. Last week was spent mixed in equal measures of fear and pride and lots of anticipation. The bitter reality of a possible war seemed closer to us in a long, long time. No, we weren't discussing Russia, Ukraine, or Israel and Palestine. War was knocking at our doors. With India Pakistan tensions running high, and while we marveled at the capabilities of our security forces, many bayed for blood. Calls for de escalation were met by utter derision from laptop warriors. So at the Crux, we thought, hey, while it's easy to fight shadow wars on social media platforms, why not hear from a real soldier who has been on enemy lines facing the opponent and understand from him what it actually means to face the enemy during times of conflict? I'm honored to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Mayur Ambastha, who is a seasoned Army veteran here on the Crux. Today, he's a corporate leader, but before that, he spent over 2 decades in the Indian Army. And after graduating from the National Defense Academy and Indian Military Academy, he held critical operational and leadership roles across conflict zones in Jammu and Kashmir, serving in Pulwama and Baramulla, and also as a United Nations peacekeeping mission in South Sudan. Lieutenant Colonel, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the Crux with us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for the opportunity and grateful. Pleasure to share my thoughts and experiences with all of your audience. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure to have you, Lieutenant Colonel. So, the way the last few days have gone, we've, of course, April 22nd was when it all started, the extremely brutal attack on innocent tourists in Pahalgam, followed by what the Indian government and Indian armed forces did with Operation Sindoor to pay back and to teach a lesson for such a dastardly act on Indian soil, and obviously decimating 9 terror camps also resulted in some sort of retaliation from Pakistan. For a long time, we were all on tenterhooks that this was escalating more and more towards a war. And as I mentioned in my, when I was introducing you, that a lot of people are laptop warriors. They're tweeting, they're posting, they're writing on social media, egging everyone on. And of course, we are extremely proud and grateful to our armed forces for protecting us. But life on the front lines is very different. And we wanted to, with your experience, draw attention to what it takes to be on the front line when such tensions are mounting and rising high. Tell us a bit about what it means to be a soldier on the front lines.
Okay. So, as far as the aspect about being a laptop warrior is concerned, even I am now a laptop warrior, from airborne to chairborne kind of thing. So, I am retired and not a part of the active army life anymore. Uh, However, this aspect of the frenzy that is created around all these things is emanating from the fact that most of the people are not exposed to the kind of training, to the kind of seasoning, mentoring, and roughening up which soldier undergoes. uh, when you say that these things are difficult and these things are uh, overwhelming at times, it is overwhelming to anyone who is not exposed to this environment as such, as a professional. For that matter, if I say today that when a surgeon opens up a person's abdomen and makes an incision, there's a lot of blood that flows. It is overwhelming for me because if you tell me to do it, my hand will shake because I am not trained to do that. That is not my. I'm not coming from that background. I'm not confident whether I'll succeed or not. I'm not confident whether I'll save that life or I'll kill that poor guy on the operation table because I'm not meant for that kind of work. When you talk of a soldier, we are talking of people who have undergone a specific training. It is meant to drill into you the standard operating procedures, the reflexes, the reactions, the mental and physical strength which is required for exactly this kind of a situation. So, what you call crisis is the, I should say, the moment of reckoning and the moment of test for a soldier, where all his training and grooming comes to the fore and is tested against real life situations, whether it is a warlike scenario which we have seen in the past week or so, or it is the counter-insurgency scenario which we are seeing in the northeast and the Kashmir regions for the last so many decades now. When it is conflict and combat, that is the time when the professionalism of a soldier comes to the fore. It is not a crisis for him. It is what he has been trained for. It is professional work. So there is no frenzy at that end.
Hmm.
It is like pressing a button to start up a machine. And when you say you press the button, power button of your computer, for you it is just a screen coming to life, but there are a lot of things happening at the same time, right? The monitor comes on, the mouse and the keyboard gets connected, and there is a fan that starts cooling the CPU. So many things are happening, right? And the processor starts working, uh, the data starts getting populated, whatever. I mean, so many things. So it is just like that. So, say the prime minister, he has that button in his hands. He's pressed that button, and that has sent the current to the grassroots level, the soldier on the ground, the people in the military as well as the paramilitary forces who are manning the frontiers, who are sitting in the hinterland, but they are now supposed to move to a new location, which is designated location for their role in combat. So when the nation is at war, no army formations are out of action.
Hmm.
Every resource, every man jack is pressed into service. Whether he's sitting in Bhopal or Cochin, whatever, he'll be sent to a location where he is a potential threat to the enemy. So
Right.
there is no uh,
Basically, mode that is activated, as you said. It's almost like, in times of peace, the soldier is conditioned a certain way, and when there
yeah.
is a time of conflict and escalation, and God forbid a war, then there is a certain mode which is activated. So to make sure that this kind of activation happens, right? That you have this ability to take on high stress levels, you're able to take on extremely physical circumstances. It could be extreme cold, it could be extreme heat, it could be heavy rain, it could be long hours without sleep. Tell us a bit about how this training is done, because obviously we know that there is extensive training which the forces go through. But as lay people, as our viewers who are listening, can you, in a brief way, tell us about what this training kind of entails?
As far as the training of a soldier is concerned, okay, I'll talk about officers and the young jawans both in the same breath.
Sure.
The fundamental factor is the basic training at the very start. When you are inducted into the forces for the first time, an officer is taken in as a cadet in NDA or OTA or IMA, and a soldier probably goes to his regimental center in the army and respective centers in the navy and the air force. How we term it is that we break the mindset to create the new mindset which is required. And when you take the word uniform,
Mm,
uniform is not the outer clothing that the person wears. Uniform is a word that means same. So we break the old mentality of 100 people who have come from 100 different backgrounds and give them a uniform mindset. We give them a uniform set of processes, uniform set of reactions. Everyone has got different thresholds when he gets into service. that threshold is changed and brought to the same level for everyone as far as possible. May not be humanly possible, but we try to achieve it to our level best, so that the complete team, which is the crux of the Indian Armed Forces, the complete team reacts in the same manner to the same situation. So everyone knows that uh, my threshold is here, and they react accordingly. Now, uh, the fundamental training that happens just post recruitment for officers as well as jawans is more centered towards physical and mental conditioning. Thereafter, depending on the arm and service which they join, whether it is armored corps or the logistics services, or the infantry, which is the foot soldiers, or the artillery, which is the big guns which fire across the international border deep into the enemy territory, or be it the air force or the navy flying branch or the technical branch or the air traffic control, the people then get the specialized training. And how the armed forces work is that every 1 year or 2 year or 3 years, there is a full-fledged exercise that takes place for everyone at different time frames as per the availability of the resources, to simulate a warlike situation and make them understand the rigors in the most realistic possible form at that particular moment when there is peace. So, say for example, I am from the mechanized infantry. For you, the war broke out 7 days back. The people who are today in the mechanized infantry would have done whatever they required to do in the war scenario. However, when I was serving for 20 years, and while I was with my battalion, every year we would go to the deserts, we would rehearse our drills, we would rehearse the reactions and the quick reactions to any surprise situations which were thrown at us to test our reactions. We would practice firing of live ammunition. We would go into the water bodies to do flotation training of our amphibious vehicles, and we would do logistics exercises also. We would do war gaming on sand models also, to devise our strategies and tactics and whatever was there to rehearse. It was done every year, year on year. It was war for the all and sundry 7 days back, but the soldier has been practicing every year. So it's nothing exceptional, nothing exceptional. So they have just, uh, 7 days back they were told probably that, gentlemen, this is the time when you have to utilize your training, and nothing changes. That guy will be doing exactly the same thing which he has been doing over and over again, year after year. The only change will be the enemy will be real this time.
Mm,
And yes, there will be somebody out to kill you also. So it is a question of the better firer wins. That's all.
right. The how many hours are actually spent in training? Like, if you look back at your tenure in your life as a soldier, how many hours per day would you all spend, in training? Maybe they were in spurts, maybe they were not every day, but
Yeah.
to understand.
I would say more than half the time is spent training,
Right.
because in armed forces, we follow the dictum that the more you train in peace, the less you bleed in war. So more than half the time, more than half.
Lieutenant Colonel, one of the most important aspects that I think, for any person's strength comes from the brain, right? Because it is a lot of mind over matter. As a soldier, you do see your comrades falling, right? They could die, they could be hit, you might lose somebody on the battlefield. But very important to have a very strong mind. How is the mental training and conditioning done? Can you give us some details on what kind of rigors are followed for that?
See, the fundamental of defense training is teamwork, and you are taught to operate as teams. These pressures, I mean, losing comrade is definitely one aspect, but a person comes to terms with it because if time and situation demands, it can be me too. And uh, the way we train people to take these kind of stresses is by making them undergo the highest kind of pressures possible, physically and mentally. It works kind of in tandem. So I'll take, for example, the you would have seen a movie many years back called Prahar of Nana
Yes.
Patekar, which was based on the commando course.
Yes.
Now we call it the Ghatak course. So most of us have had to do the course, and that course is an ideal example of how the pressure and the capability to raise your threshold to a very high level is ingrained into a soldier. So you go a 40 days or course, and every day your training period starts increasing. So probably on day one you have gone for physical training at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and your day ended at about 10. Next day the PT will be at 5 o'clock, and you will go to sleep at 11. Next day 4 o'clock, you will go to sleep at 12, and gradually your sleep is decreasing. Your body is getting tired, and your tasks are getting more and more difficult as time passes. So first week you were targeting 10 kilometers of endurance march. Second week it increases to 20. Third week it increases to 30, and the final phase it goes up to 40 with full battle load. Under routine circumstances, if I tell someone that you have to run, kind of jog for 40 kilometers within this limited time frame, otherwise you are disqualified, with 17 kgs on your back, which most probably won't be even clothing, it will be sandbags, and your weapon, they will say it's not possible. I mean, cannot be done. But every month, a fresh batch comes there and does exactly the same thing. And you cannot get a qualified certification unless and until you do everything that is required. You will be called back again to redo it if you don't pass. So the point is that the thresholds and the tolerance levels and the capability to perform under severe pressure, despite the fact that your comrades are falling around you, and there are injuries and evacuations, it is all instilled by making people undergo the situations which exert the maximum pressure on your mindset and your body at the same time. Those are the worst circumstances. So one time is the training as a cadet, and the second time is courses like these, which I just mentioned, where
Right.
this training is incorporated. Other thing that happens is that you will be surprised to know that we even simulate this kind of a situation. That okay, you are 10 guys. The empire says that okay, this guy is dead, and this guy is injured. Now what are you gonna do? Get your drills into play. So the casualty evacuation, the and that then it sinks in that this guy whom the empire says is dead but he's alive, but he
Mm.
may die. It can happen, and then we will be required to follow a certain set of processes. So everyone knows what is to be done. So as I
Right.
like to tell a lot of people that in the case of a Fauji, uh, he has to follow a drill even in death. It may be he himself, but if you see 10 odd casualties from an operation, or you would have seen pictures from Pulwama or Kargil,
Mm.
even the coffins are in a perfectly straight line.
Absolutely. Yeah. You
So
know,
when you are
you
process driven, these things don't come up actually.
right.
You are just reacting to a situation.
You've been involved in training as well, right? Training officers, and we've discussed a few of your stints offline.
Yes.
And obviously training itself has evolved over the last years, because now we have a lot of technology, so you can simulate a lot of things. And that is obviously all around the world as the technology is competing with each other to give secured, our security forces the best chance that they have when they're out there. How has technology changed, if you can tell us a little briefly on how important it is today, what role it plays in creating these very good training circumstances or scenarios?
Ma'am, technology is definitely a major booster as far as training is concerned because take simulators for example, which you mentioned. So I am from mechanized infantry, and we fire anti-tank guided missiles. One missile costs, I think, several lakhs, and you can't give so much of practice to your gunners. The moment simulators come into play, you can give 100 practice to a gunner without even firing a real missile, and he gets more and more confident. Same comes for tank driving. There are simulators for that without causing wear and tear to your actual equipment, which is to be used in war, actually. Uh,
Right.
when it comes to firing of rifles, and everything has got a simulator today without firing the ammunition. Firstly, it causes a lot of savings in terms of finances and budgetary savings. Secondly, it gives more opportunity to the soldier to gain that confidence. And nowadays we have simulators and softwares which tell the user the errors that he is probably committing and carry out corrections on his own. So we negate the personal interference of the instructor also. However, at the same time, I will also say that technology in warfare, at least, technology may not negate the human element completely ever. So even if you say that today in the India-Pakistan conflict also maximum maximum conflict was uh, dominated by drones and unmanned interventions, right? We never crossed the international border or the line of control. But then who was controlling those unmanned vehicles? There
Yeah.
was a man behind them, a woman behind them, somewhere in a control center. And it is finally the human expertise that come into play. And definitely the real ammunition or the real driving or the real use of the equipment or the missile, whatever it may be, is definitely required. You can't prepare a fighter pilot by making him train on a simulator alone.
Yeah.
That physical pressure, the tension, and the realization that my error of judgment of an iota here and there can cost me my life and the plane also. So that real equipment is definitely important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That kind of real life experiences can't be removed from it.
True.
When we discuss training, and this I'm asking as a woman as well, that is there is there anything which is done differently for the women personnel in armed forces? Is there a training which is um, distinctly different from the male? I'm sure the crux of the most of the training would be the same, but are there any distinguishing factors that you would be aware of that you could tell
Nothing
us?
major, ma'am. Nothing major. Today we are in times when even the National Defense Academy has women cadets, girl cadets are there, and they are undergoing the same kind of training that their male counterparts do. Point is that the fundamental issue here that we face is that the enemy is not going to treat them differently.
Yeah,
The bullet will not stop and ask, oh, man or woman, and then hit or not hit. It's not going to happen. So they have to be as fit, as professional as a soldier is supposed to be. Soldier, the term soldier is gender agnostic.
yeah.
It doesn't
The
matter.
what I allude to is this. Of course, we are also progressing in this, and more women are being inducted into the army, and that whole discussion of should women be there on the front lines, because there is a whole morale issue that plays, right? Like if female soldiers are ever captured by enemy lines, by the enemy. And then that whole, this is a debate which has been ongoing, and we obviously see that a lot of it, movement is in the right direction. Women are pushing to be part of the forces, and hence I asked about it. But again, this is an evolving situation. I think as our briefing, India Pakistan briefing done by the ministry here, the government here showed that we had two amazing women soldiers who were handling the briefing and leading from the front. We mentioned about the mental toll which can take place, and some of the statistics that we came across is that, again, we're just not talking about the army, we're talking about anybody who is part of the armed personnel. Here we have some stats, where we came across over 700 suicides in the Central Armed Police Forces and over 55,000 personnel quitting in 5 years, which has led to a special initiative by the Armed Forces Medical Services tying up with NIMHANS in Bangalore to collaborate and understand and talk more about mental health, which could be emerging as an issue within the armed forces. Do you have any thoughts on that?
This has always been a point of concern, man. It is nothing new. Uh, the point is that the factors that contribute to these kind of incidents are equally divided between the professional life and the personal life. That is point number one. I have been privy to many such cases, and it has always come to light that the trigger has been, in majority of the cases, not all, but the final trigger for that act has been on the personal front. But then we can't negate the professional aspects, because the culmination of all the factors is finally coming out. Now,
Right.
what are the professional factors here? That is what I can comment on. One is the constant pressure. So I'll take one example just to explain to you. You must be familiar with the Rashtriya Rifles.
Yes.
Rashtriya Rifles are a specialized counter-insurgency outfits, and those battalions are meant to be there in counter-insurgency only. People keep rotating. So when I went to Rashtriya Rifles, I went for a tenure of 2.5 years, and next 2.5 years, there was no punch in and punch out time as in corporate. We were on duty 24/7. There was no Saturday or Sunday applicable. Uh, we in a lighter vein, we discussed it with the हरकतुल मुजाहिदीन that संडे को मत किया करो, but वो मानते नहीं, अभी हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते उसमें, है ना? So if they have a action on Sunday, you better be there. And if an operation starts on a Saturday night, uh, there goes your weekend. So in fact, we never realized these weekends there, and that stress of constantly being on duty is one contributor. It has to have an impact. Thereafter, the threat, the constant threat.
Mm.
You have multiple layers of fencing, lighting, sentries. There are drills happening for simulating a militant attack on your bases. You are constantly under that pressure that, okay, you hear one shot and you don't know whether it is a cracker or a firearm. It causes stress in the middle of the night. Sometimes, I have had situations where I could hear my phone ringing in my sleep. It was not ringing, but I was
Mm.
so stressed up in certain times that I was waiting for information, somebody to call, and I could just hear it ringing, although it was silent, because of those apprehensions, those constant pressures
Mm.
that are coming. In that, if a comrade is killed in action, it adds on.
Yeah.
At that point of time, if you are in a situation where your communication with home is severed, where there is no mobile network, another stressor. You can't speak to your family now. It has happened to me. I'm speaking from personal experience. 3, 4 months, no discussion with family. And the only way of them knowing that I'm all right was they could call up my exchange and ask, "Ki saab theek thaak hai?" They would say yes. But at my end, I could not speak,
Right.
right? In such circumstances, if someone has a marital discord problem, now that is the final straw sometimes.
Hmm.
Every human has got some limit. Uh, Professional aspects, we may have trained him, but if you add the personal aspect to it, we may not have trained him for that. And
This is in spite of the training that goes on. And, we started the discussion with how soldiers are trained differently, but
yes,
mental health and stresses, when they all come in together,
absolutely.
uh, it can become very difficult to handle.
And today, why people say that these cases are increasing gradually, because our definitions of stress are also changing. They are dynamic. Uh, in my childhood, we had these trunk calls and booking to talk to
Yeah.
some relative. Today we are talking face to face, which was unimaginable across hundreds of kilometers. Today, if you deny Wi-Fi to a person for 12 hours, he will be stressed. And you tell the same person that okay, for 3 months you can't speak to your family. 50 years back, he won't have felt the stress,
Yeah.
but today he will feel, because finally we
Family.
are not importing our soldiers, right? They are coming from the same society you and me belong to. So
Absolutely.
these are common
When we
factors. Things like that.
talk about family, Lieutenant Colonel, I mean, soldiers are trained. Army families say that they are trained as well. I have a lot of friends and family friends from the armed forces, and they're like, we are as mentally conditioned as our husbands or our sons or our brothers and partners are. But truth of the matter is that in times of conflict, there is no reset for the soldier. If something happens,
Yeah.
they pay with their life, and that is a constant um, thought and stress for families. Also, families who
True.
are there. Sometimes you're stationed with your families, and then in matter, when there is a serious situation, the families are sent back. How to how do soldiers? I mean, it's a very simple question, but it's a very basic question. But one of the most important thing is, how do you handle human relationships as an armed personnel, as a security forces personnel?
See, as far as the wives are concerned, I have always advised my young officers when I was in my battalion that choose your spouse well. She should be aware as to what she is getting into, and the best way to do that is make them interact with the wives of Faujis, so that they give them untinted, unadulterated vision of what they are supposed to face in times of crisis. Secondly, as far as the training is concerned, it's imparted only to the Fauji, the soldier. Families are not trained by us. Who trains them? Who conditions them? It is for the soldier to train his family. He has to make facts and figures clear to them that situations like XYZ can arise, and you have to handle. And these things, sometimes people ask me that uh, how come a soldier doesn't feel that apprehension कि मेरे बाद मेरी family का क्या होगा when he's fighting in a conflict. The point here is that that particular soldier would have prepared his family mentally, financially, in every aspect. He's catered for them, and he is at peace in his mind that even if something happens to me, they are looked after. And the same thing, he conditions his family also into that kind of mindset. And I have seen, okay, there is a document. Okay, I also prepared this. Things to do in case I conquer. Point is that the aspects like financial management, asset management, handling of pensionary issues, the things to be done regarding my own paperwork, all that should be known to my spouse. And when you are explaining this document to her, she is getting prepared,
Yeah.
and that is the training for her. And in that moment, she understands that this is a reality that I have to face. This is a risk that is very potent, which can become very real at any given point of time. This would have happened with a lot of wives now in the last 7 days, when the families would have been sent back from the military bases to their hometowns, and where husbands would have been dispatched overnight. So this would have happened. So yes, it is the sensitizing of your family by the soldier, and making them understand the do's and don'ts, and explaining that this is what is my profession.
Mm.
So it is not as if other professions don't have occupational hazards. So many people have so many different kind of threats and dangers as part of their profession. So this is one. So take it like that.
When you look back and you've been so candid, and I'm loving this conversation. I think a lot of us learned a lot, and it's always good to hear, as I said, from people who've actually been there and done that, rather than people who haven't. When you look back at your stint, 2 decades long stint in the army, any hairy situations that come to mind? Anything that happened which seemed very dangerous, or something which you felt was touch and go, that you could tell us about, and what you learned from it?
Ma'am, as I said, it is not never deemed as dangerous by a soldier, because it is part of your professional work and you have been trained to handle these situations. Probably the most challenging part of my career was my UN peacekeeping tenure in South Sudan, because uh, warfare follows certain rules, right? We and the enemy both are following a certain set of rules. But when you are in the middle of a civil war, a tribal
Hmm.
conflict, there are no rules. And that is the most challenging situation that I have faced in my life. In December 2011, so I when I reached the UN peacekeeping mission, uh, it was the nation was Sudan, and South Sudan had not come into existence. After some time, in the month of July 2011, South Sudan gained independence. We were there, and yes, that was also a unique experience to see a nation take birth while being on ground zero. So a lot of things happened for 3 4 months. Things were okay, and while we were expecting an inter Sudan South Sudan conflict, as in Pakistan and India, we've seen the precedent, and in many other nations also, when two nations part ways with each other,
Right.
there is a conflict generally. The opposite happened. The violence started within South Sudan, within the factions within the country, between the tribes, which were very
Right.
potent and armed tribes. They are not unarmed by any measures. They have weapons. They have anti-aircraft guns and vehicles and all that. And a lot of people with spears and sickles and axes also. So people
Right.
march in thousands to kill each other, and we stuck in between as peacekeepers. We saw the worst happening there. I won't go into those details, but that kind of violence, that kind of primitive kind of a situation was the most challenging that I have faced, and I was pretty apprehensive of the futility of losing my men in that conflict. In this thing which is happening for the past 7 days, a casualty, a death of a soldier is understandable and acceptable, because it is for our cause. There the cause had nothing to do with me or my nationality or my nation. I was on
Right.
duty there, of course. My duty was to stop the violence, to keep peace. But was I ready to do it at the cost of lives at my end? It was a big dilemma. I was fortunate. Uh, we came out clean from there. We carried out a lot of operations. We maintained peace till such time we were there. Things got worse after I left, and there were
How do you
casualties.
maintain peace if you're not allowed to wield any
Yeah,
strength?
there are mechanisms. Of course, we uh, changed the situation from peacekeeping to peace enforcement thereafter, where we were allowed to use force to a great extent, and that was done. We did maintain peace with whatever the United Nations also understood that there is a requirement to change the rules of engagement.
Right.
So there are chapters of UN which legislate how much force can be used. So the charter was changed, and we came into the peace enforcement grid, where we were free to use force also if required. Luckily, I never had to do it, but we had to flex our muscles definitely, and
Mm.
that worked. But in just 6 months after my departure from Sudan, there were casualties. The officer who had replaced us, me in particular, he died. Uh,
Wow.
I think there were one officer, one JCO, and 4 to 5 Jawans who died in a particular action. So there was a lot of violence there. So fighting on foreign soil for an alien cause as a peacekeeper in a different uniform, that presented challenges which probably were difficult at that time to overcome. We did manage well. We did our task pretty well, but that is the I think the epitome of challenge that I can see during my 2 decades of service.
Lieutenant Colonel, as we come towards the end of our discussion, I must ask you about the other challenge which comes to soldiers when you all transition from serving to civilian life. And you of course are founder of Flux Wing Solutions, so the great time to help us understand how the transition, how difficult is the transition, firstly, from wearing the uniform to being a civilian, where, as you said, even when you die as a soldier, everything is in the right, in a perfect line. Even your coffins are in a perfect line, to driving on city roads where there is no lane driving at all. I mean, it is a jungle out here in India in many cases. So how do you mentally transition, and of course then professionally as well? And you've transitioned well into a corporate life now. So tell us a bit about that, and that is my last question to you.
It is your last question and my favorite. Uh, Veteran transition is a matter which is close to my heart, and I have been taking a lot of initiatives in that department. So, yes, irrespective of the nationality, transition of a soldier from military to a civil life is difficult. It's a challenge. Mainly because soldiers, whether officers or jawans, they are plucked from the civil stream at a very young age, in formative years, ranging from 18 to 22, 23. And the exposure to civil life is bare minimum for the whatever duration they serve. When you try to approach a military cantonment as a civilian, you will be stopped at the gates. No entry at all.
Yeah.
Confidentiality, security, blah blah, whatever. And when I am there in uniform, my life is restricted to those walls because I don't require to really go out. And secondly, I am so busy with the routine and mundane that I don't have time to think about outside. And then comes a time when you take a call that okay, now I am moving out, and you suddenly realize that the outside doesn't know about me, I don't know about the outside. The state of mutual ignorance is what becomes the biggest challenge for the veteran himself, because uh, many people fail to understand the sheer fact that it is the veteran who is moving out of his comfort zone to a different territory. You can't expect the people in corporate to adapt to your requirements. You have to adapt to their requirements. So a lot of adaptability comes into play. Uh, while I am very confident in stating the fact that there is not much that the veteran doesn't know, he is a jack of all. He can do a lot of things. He has the fundamental qualities that uh, make a person deliver in the corporate world. However, he speaks a different lingo. He is not attuned to the corporate jargon, and there are bridges required for that move from the military to corporate. So there are some bridges provided by the Ministry of Defense also, some management programs and some training. The the process I recommend for all the veterans is generally in steps. First part is between your departure from the uniform and 2 years prior. That is the time when you have to clearly identify your objectives, your aspirations, and ambitions, and at the same time do a SWOT analysis as to where your strengths and weaknesses lie and what is your passion. Because at that stage in life, after 10 or 20 years of service, you are at a different level in the Maslow's pyramid. So you have to look at all these things holistically and then select a very clear cut objective like a good soldier for yourself. And then come what may, again, like a good soldier, objective shall not be, I should say, compromised in any manner at any given point. So after that, once you have set the objective, you upskill, you study about the target domain, you train, you learn, you interact with people who are in that industry, in that domain, in those roles. Uh, Take informed decision, and before taking informed decisions, take information, because information is the first part of an informed decision. Once you are out, the key to your success lies in active networking with the right kind of people, and thereafter things will start falling into place, if not immediately, in some time as you understand the nuances of how corporate works. Things are difficult, yes, but nothing is easy. Why for the soldier, for anyone? Job market is a challenge, employment is a challenge. So I also recommend to the veterans that instead of looking solely at employment, try businesses, entrepreneurship. While it is a common misnomer that soldiers are not made for business because they can't sell anything, they don't know M of marketing. Yes, true to a great extent, but one is surprised to see how many veterans are succeeding in these functions. There was a time when there was a stereotype regarding veterans. They are best for administration and security and probably facility management. Today, I see veterans in banking. I see entrepreneurs, successful founders of startups. I can take names, but there are so many of them. People are MDs, CEOs, chief operating officers. They are in companies, international companies in India and abroad, companies like Amazon, Flipkart, Delivery, Wells Fargo, JPMC, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. All of them have got they have got veteran hiring programs because they have realized that it is not a favor that you are doing by hiring veterans.
Do
If you
Indian
hire
companies also have these programs? Do large Indian companies also have these programs to
Indian
recruit from?
companies are few. I'll not say that they don't recruit veterans, but structured programs are lacking. And this has been one of my endeavors for the last few years to request the Indian corporate houses, the biggest ones to start with, like the Birlas, the Tatas, the Mahindras, to start a structured veteran internship or veteran hiring program for people at all levels, not only the officers, the JCUs and Jawans also, because we are speaking about very large numbers. There are 60 to 80,000 uniformed personnel retiring, hanging their uniform every year, and the age group we are talking about is 35 to 55. They are, firstly, their average fitness is much better than the average citizen of India.
Absolutely.
Their mental faculties are good. They are, as it is, a very selected lot because you have made them undergo a process of selection many multiple criteria, so they have
Yeah.
already proven that they are a cut above the rest. My point is that instead of doing them a favor, think of this. Think of return on investment. You have invested in their training. You have fed them, clothed them, and made them work for 10, 15, 20 years. But the amount that you have spent in their training and their administration, has it been recouped in that short time? No. It is the taxpayers' money. They still have a lot to give. Extract more. They are more than happy to work. Extract more. And that is when you will extract the real return on investment of this nation.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah,
definitely something which needs wider attention because
absolutely.
this is a real challenge, the challenge of transitioning for the armed forces. And as you correctly said, the focus has to stay on Jawans as well because somewhere we see at least officers taking on trainings, doing courses, and I know personally know people who've transitioned into corporate lives, healthcare sector, education, defense tech startups, which are in the defense sector as well, have been able to absorb some of the officers. But for the Jawans, it is always also been quite a challenge. Lieutenant Colonel Mayur, thank you so much for your insights. I think we understood and learned things much better. I think our audiences would also appreciate. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your personal experience and professional experience with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, ma'am. Extremely grateful. I hope I have added some positive aspects to your telecast.
All right, here are our crux takeaways. The armed forces obviously undergo extensive training to strengthen body and mind. Remember that they are the ones who are on on the front line, at the front line, and being for blood and calling for war is really something that can definitely be avoided. How does the army, how do the armed forces stay on point? Well, constant process of drills and mock exercises keep our armed forces sharp and their SOPs on point. Mental health challenges are emerging as a worrying aspect for armed personnel, and very important for us to consider is veteran transition. How do we get them absorbed into the workforce? It will require structured corporate programs. Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Crux. See you next time.